posting these on YouTube, so we are ready to go. But if you have to stop for anything, this is tape, so just stop and we'll pick up where we left off.
Okay, right on.
Because this conversation, I wanted to like talk generally a little bit about your career, but also your take on your experiences and the role that you believe as a journalist you play within the community, and that's for me the important part of these conversations. Let me start with this though. I didn't know this. Did your career start in Cincinnati?
Wow, yeah. Okay,
I
so
do my research, man. I
no,
do my
I was gonna
research.
say that's pretty good. Yeah, my first job out of school, I graduated that summer of '97, and I'd had an internship where a couple editors, like I made some good connections and what have you, and I didn't have a steady job offer, but this one journalist who I knew, Julie Engelbrecht, who was the sports editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer, said, until you get something permanent, why don't you come up here? We'll pay you, a living wage. There were benefits attached to it. It was almost like a postgraduate internship, but with some benefits. And I did that for all of it's like maybe 5 months, something like that.
It was a start.
6 months. It was a start. It was a start, and that's really what I needed. Like it's what any writer needs is to start writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what? You came back to Florida after that? I think it was.
Yeah, my first job, my first real job after that was working for the St. Pete Times. It was called the St. Pete Times then. That's how long it's been. The newspaper has absorbed another paper and changed its name. I'm now one of those old guys who's back in my day. It was called the St. Petersburg Times. And we were ink-stained wretches, and we liked it, and it was wholesome.
I know your next career, you're going to be an actor. That's okay. I got you.
Apologies to Dana Carvey for that. Terrible.
He'll forgive you, I'm sure. What were those early days like, though? And I know what you mean exactly. Like, looking back at the early days of what things were like. But for as a writer, what was it like?
I mean, I think it's trying to first figure out who you are as when you're writing. Early on, you're trying different styles and different. You're still learning different styles, learning different techniques, applying fiction like narrative fiction to writing styles to nonfiction. It's reading a lot. It's following orders a lot. Like your editors are telling you do this, do that, write this story, write that story. And I had a great editor named Leon Carter who was with the New York Daily News for a long time, more of a mentor, and he just said never say no to an assignment. When you're starting out, never say no. Just always say yes. And it's how to get yourself into a bunch of situations that are uncomfortable. And I learned early on. It was such a valuable lesson, man. I learned early on that anytime I went into a situation where I felt insecure and I felt uncomfortable, I knew that I was going to learn something that day. And that's kind of how I flipped the switch in me. Like I'd feel insecure. I was in a room full of people, maybe like at a press conference, or I went to go interview somebody who had some kind of life thing happen to them that I couldn't relate to, maybe. And I would just tell myself, "You're going to learn something today," and that let me like bring the pressure down and open myself to acknowledging that I didn't know. And that's, I think, one of the most important things for journalists, right, is to be able to say, I don't know, is to try not to be an expert at any point, just to really understand the people that are smarter than you and are teaching you something, are giving you some perspective about the way they see the world. And I think that's what's valuable to make good journalism.
And so early in those early days, I mean, you were writing anything and everything. You also wrote sports too. You did sports.
Yeah, primarily sports. I was a sports writer from college, and in college, like at 19 years old, I was published by the Sun Sentinel. I was the regular sports correspondent in Gainesville. Um, you know, and kind of writing, the weekly practice reports, but little features. And then on game day, I would write the big writer would come up from Fort Lauderdale, and I would write the second story, the sidebar, and maybe the notes column or two sidebars, and they paid me great. I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this for a living. It was fantastic, and that opportunity came about. And I think that there's little moments along your life that you can say, that you can point to, right? That you can plot and say, that was a significant thing, which is I'd started writing at the college newspaper only because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I went in as an engineering student, and after taking some classes and whatever, I decided that was not going to be for me. But a guidance counselor said, there's an open house at the school newspaper. Why don't you go check it out? Well, the school newspaper is the Independent Florida Alligator, which is arguably one of the best college papers in the country, because it has students from the university, but it's also from a really great journalism program, but it's also a completely independent newspaper.
Yep.
Which it's an interesting wrinkle, and it got my feet wet into writing. And when I came back for that summer, I decided that I wanted to write for my hometown paper, which at the time I was living with my folks in Broward. I grew up in Broward, and I said I wanted to write for the Sun Sentinel. So I had this uncle who was an accountant at a newspaper in Cuba, and he loved journalism. And he's like, just call them and tell them that you'll do anything to just be in the newsroom. So for every day for a week, I called the late Fred Turner, who was the sports editor at the Sun Sentinel, and his secretary, Bonnie DePacio, would pick up the phone. She was more like the editorial assistant in the area. I was more than a secretary. And she would, I said, by the end of the week, she'd say, "Hey, Carlos," and I'd say, "Hey, Bonnie." I said, I'm hoping to talk to Fred. I'll do anything. And she's like, "Hold on a second." She transfers me over. Fred Turner picks up the phone and goes, "Carlos, so you want to be a sports writer?" I was like, "Come on down to my office on Monday." So I put on my Ziedler and Ziedler blazer with my dress pants and with my little my clips, and I went down and they knew that I was at UF, and he paired me with this other journalist, Ray Cox, who's really focused on features and figuring out writers and what have you. And they just worked with me. They just believed that I had the number one thing, which was the desire to be good at something, even if I had very little experience.
No. You know what? I wonder. Do you think that a young Carlos could do it that way now?
I think that's the only way to do it. Still I think there's still some things that are lessons that hold over, that stand up the test of time, and that is tenacity and passion. Those things are irreplaceable. Those things. The system may change. I mean, I don't know if it'd work at the New York Times. Maybe, maybe. If I was living in New York and I did something like that and wanted to work in the mailroom, and I said, "Look, I'll work in the mailroom. It's fine. I just want to be in the building." That's literally what it was. It was I want to be in the building. And when I went there, they were like, "We want you to start writing stories for us on the football team from Gainesville." Now you have to understand, for a kid who was 19, you didn't get to cover the football team for the Alligator until you had been there for a couple years. So for the Alligator, I was writing about women's basketball, which was a great beat. But for the Sun Sentinel, I was writing about football. So it was I got to write the big sport, for the major paper and get paid $275 a story. Do you know what that $275 a story was like? That's insane money. I was minting money.
Oh, man.
It was crazy. And I was like, man, when I graduate from school and I don't have to worry about going to class, I'm going to be so good at this.
Wow. I never got to the point where I got to write the big story. I was writing, the high school football, so I wasn't minting money, but it was still nice to have the 300 little word story on the side there with my name on it. I was happy. I was like, all right, I'm getting something. I'm getting there. Um, you think about all those experiences you've had, and here you are now, award-winning food editor at the Miami Herald, and I don't know, how did all of those experiences, all those things that you got to do, help you at this point? Because this is something too for people to understand. Like with journalists, I mean, there are some people who just like will spend. I haven't seen as many people who will spend most of their lives covering one thing, you know. But most of the time, it's not that way. We're jumping beats. We're moving around, doing a lot of different things over our careers. But how did all of that help you now in what you're doing?
Well, I think it helped me see that all the beats have one thing in common, which is something that Evan Ben once really enunciated, which is find people that are smarter than you and talk to them and ask them questions. And that's really all of journalism, is kind of being a conduit, knowing that you're not the ultimate arbiter in the room. It's talking to lots of people and hearing lots of different opinions and facts, and I think that's what helped the most, because, like I said, I've covered everything in a newsroom, and that's usually how it goes for a journalist. I'm also very restless. I get bored with doing something for, a couple years. Once you've gone on the merry-go-round, because every beat has a cycle. Every beat has a cycle where first it's, South Beach Food and Wine Festival happens in February, and then, the James Beard Awards are announced in April, and then the season ends in May, and then the season in Miami starts in October, late September, and then you write about openings in restaurants. So you can get on the cycle, you can be on the merry-go-round, and it can get boring. So I think it's about finding things that make you that make you that make you excited, that make you feel passionate for doing something new.
Was the first time you were writing about food, was that at the Post, the Palm Beach Post?
Yeah. I had been writing kind of general features. I was writing like the big Sunday story in sports. That's really what my job had evolved into, and I loved it. It was great. The only thing that got tiresome was sometimes dealing with athletes who were hemmed in. Honestly, they were poked and prodded and moved about by PR people, and you were given little snippets and little bites of time with them, and you're taking little bites of time and little and little and little, and it's not being able to cultivate long time periods for interviews. And it got tiresome, and they asked me if I wanted to do that but apply it to general features, and that was like a revelation. Like, that was really great, because it opened me up to do the thing that I was interested in, which is tell stories and talk to people on a wider scale. And I had a great editor there. The food editor at the Palm Beach Post is Liz Balmaceda, who was a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist at the Miami Herald for many years. She won. She shared in one Pulitzer and won another one outright. And she was the one that told me, you can tell great stories in food and through food. And so she kind of recruited me to start writing food stories, and the rest is kind of history.
Do you remember, like, maybe not necessarily the first one, or maybe you do, but I'm just like, when you first started to dip your toe into that topic, what was it like for you at the beginning? Because you're used to, talking about a game and, the describing a game and the athletes involved and all that. Now you're talking about something very, very different. But do you remember what it was like early on?
Yeah, I remember thinking, like, is this important? Like, are people interested in this? Like, does this resonate with readers? And I was stunned to learn that it was not only important and relevant to readers, but much more so than anything I wrote in sports. Because sports, people really care about what happens between the lines, right? Everything that happens outside. The sports writers that dedicate themselves to write about the personalities of people, and sometimes brilliantly, like the Mitch Albums and the Dan Le Batards of the world, brilliantly about the person in their lives off the field. It's rewarding as a writer to do that, to get to know those people. But my experience was that readers didn't care that much. And that's the reason why we don't have an ESPN the magazine, really. I mean, we do, and same thing with Sports Illustrated, but not with the same kind of readerships. I feel like that idea of like an athlete feel, even when you can relate to them, their life is so much more lofty. Like they're just
Well,
being rich.
they're like celebrities or people
Yeah,
in power.
exactly.
It's something else. Yeah.
It's like writing about celebrities. Like, yes, there are things that celebrities, they're just like us, like there's things that they're human beings, but people don't care in the same way. It doesn't affect their daily life, I think is
Right.
what I mean to say. It doesn't affect their daily life. But when I started writing about food, like I found an interesting family or something, and I wrote about their restaurant, and I wrote about how they, like the trajectory that led them to open this thing that had then turn their lives into a thing that gave them income, but also passion and meaning. And then you write about this place, and people in the community read about it, and they go, and it changes that restaurant owner's life and the staff's life and everything else. And then the community feels like they learned something like, oh, I have a new pizza place, I have a new Mexican place, I have a new taco place.
Yeah.
I found the new, wow, this Cuban sandwich that I had here is really the best one I've had. And that really affects people's daily lives. And I was surprised by that. And that has been the thing that's really kindled an interest and a passion for me in it.
And you know what? Not everybody is into sports, but we all eat food.
That is correct. That is correct. Some of us eat too much food. I am patting my stomach, but
No, don't remind me. I know. Then you got the gig. I remember I was working. We had the WLRN had its studio at the Miami Herald, and I remember they brought you in, and people were like, "Oh, this guy's really good." And I never met you at that point. I didn't know. What was it like getting that gig? I mean, your hometown paper was the Sentinel, but here you are now at the Miami Herald as the food editor. Now this is your gig. What was that like?
well, it's funny because I grew up in Broward, but my heart was always in Dade because my parents.
I won't tell anybody from Broward you just said that.
No, I mean they know. They know. Like, look, girl, I only love croquetas in my bed. I'm sorry. I only love croquetas in Miami. I'm sorry.
People in
But-
South Florida understand this inside joke, but that's all right.
But no, I mean, like all my family was in Hialeah, Southwest Miami, and La Sahuesera. My dad and my mom were the only ones that lived in Broward. So it's like I lived like staring out the window, like for my parents to like go, and we'd go like 3 times a week to my abuela's house. And when I went to my abuela's house, it was all like, the 15 cousins and los tíos and las tías, and like that energy and that life and like that's where my heart was,
You're a Miami boy.
Yeah, I am a Miami boy. So
Totally.
So getting the job at the Herald was, I mean, this is where I'd always wanted to work. I mean, I like always, like I never dreamt of writing for the New York Times or the Washington Post, although I've had opportunities, that first year my hair was on fire writing at the Herald because I felt like I had to be on top of everything and I wanted to understand what the food scene was like and this and the restaurants and which place was good and which stories were out there. And it was so vast. It was like opening the door to like one of those ultra quiet rooms, like from an ultra quiet room into like a concert, into a Metallica concert. And it was just like the flow of all this information. Honestly, after the first year, I was burnt out. I mean, I was burnt out. And I stepped back and I said, all right. I adjusted the volume down, I adjusted my levels, and I said, all right, I'm gonna sift through all this noise. And instead of feeling like I gotta write about everything, I'm gonna write about only the things that really catch my attention. Like the small stories, things that really have a narrative, things that really have a feeling to them, things that really feel like Miami. And that's what I did going into my second year. And then it's like I found my cruising altitude. Like, all right, I am figuring this out.
I think, and thank you for saying that. I think that's an interesting aspect of what we do for a living. There's so much in the community to cover, and if even just going through our emails, you'll lose your mind if you think that you have to do it all. And You just have to, yeah, I think that's a really good way to say it. You have to find your cruising altitude, figure out what are the stories that are really catching your attention. As a food editor, how much time do you spend? And I know the Miami Herald, and I'll ask you about this later. It's a different situation, not having an office, but how much time do you spend, you know, I guess at a desk, and how much time are you out, visiting with people, going to restaurants? Granted with COVID, how we've been living life, but what's the ratio?
Oh man, well, there's no newsroom at the Miami Herald. Obviously, we're all working from home. We're 100 little bureaus scattered throughout Miami. Which, you know what, that's how it should be. Like the things that editors used to always tell you is get out of the newsroom. Good editors will tell you get out of the newsroom. Go talk to people. That's where the stories are. Like your phone isn't gonna ring and you're gonna pick it up and you're gonna have a Pulitzer. You know what I mean? Like that's not how that works. I mean, sometimes a building collapses and the phone rings, but then you have to get up and go to the thing.
Yeah.
So I spend my time, I'd say about 50-50, half the time, lining up interviews and going to interview people, and sometimes it leads to something and sometimes it doesn't. That's kind of how I try to balance it. I always am checking myself to make sure that I haven't been sitting down inside my house for too long. Like, all right, there's a story that I need to get out to, and whether it's I need to go see a restaurant or talk to an owner, or if I talk to somebody on the phone, like, even with COVID, now, it's less so, but I say, oh, could I do this in person? And if I could, I'll go over there and have a coffee with them or interview them in person or, kind of pick their brain a litle bit,
Yeah. Now, you know what, and since you brought it up, I wanted to ask, I mean, so the Miami Herald used to be in an office in Doral. For a long time, you guys had this, and I never got to go in it, by the way. You had that office on the water, downtown Miami. And that lot now is sitting there. We don't know what the heck's going to go in it. But I think it was during COVID, all of a sudden they tell you there's no office. The place you're leasing, not leasing anymore. You're not even printing at that printing press, right? You're printing out of the Sentinel's printing press. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, it's true. As a reporter, you want to spend as much time as you can out. But what's it like, though, not having a base? I mean, is there something good, not good about that?
I'm probably a bad person to ask because I spent most of my career and all my fundamental years as a sports writer, which you are never in the office.
That's true.
You're always at a stadium. When you're not at the stadium, you're at your house. You're going to the office to do your expense report back in the day when it was like it was a sheet of paper with like carbon paper in it, and you wrote it with your hand like a Neanderthal.
We're going to the old days.
Back to the St. Petersburg Times.
No, and you know what? You're right. Like sports guys, I would never see them. And I think I saw you like once in a while. I think during Game of Thrones season, I'd see you the day after the newest episode, and that was it.
Yeah, I'd come in and be like, all right, let's talk about Game of Thrones, have my weekly meeting, and then
everybody was gone.
Yeah.
So I guess it doesn't hurt then because
it didn't hurt me. It didn't hurt me. Like we meet, we meet virtually, once a week, with my editors and what have you, my editors and other writers. But like we're always on a WhatsApp group. Like there's never any question what everyone in the group is up to because we're always like, before I'm up, I already have messages in my WhatsApp group of just, friends just BSing, my colleagues and friends just BSing and talking about what's going on and what did you see the story and whatever. So it's like, I don't feel disconnected. I feel as connected as I ever have. But maybe if you're a, I don't know, City Hall reporter or something like that, it's different, if you used to have like a home base and, but I don't miss it. I'm fine. Let's keep doing this forever.
Yeah, no. It's interesting. It's an interesting take. I am back in the studio. For a while I was, broadcasting from home, which is a little bit weird. I wanted to ask you briefly about your podcast and about podcasting in general. It was a few years ago you started La Ventanita, really fun podcast. I love this, by the way, I really do. And I know that, for you didn't have audio experience that much. And But it was a success, and now you have the second season coming out. And I wanted to know from you. I mean, look, you spent all these years as a writer, but now I see more and more newspapers going into the podcast business. And I just wondered, like, what, is the Herald and other newspapers that you may have heard from, is this where everybody's going now? Is it like, all right, we need to start a podcast, we need to go in this direction? Do you think that's where journalism's going?
I think it's still no. The answer is no. I think that every newspaper is gonna have some kind of multimedia, like it has to, because like the newspaper itself, back in my day, you know what I mean? Like yesterday's news thrown into the wet bushes tomorrow is not a great business model.
Yeah, yeah.
Printed on paper thrown into the wet bushes tomorrow is not a great business model. But for me, it was more about keeping myself engaged and interested. It's like what I was saying earlier, like once you've been on the merry-go-round a couple times, a couple spins around, I want to do something different. And when I first did the podcast in 2019, it was like, let's do something really different. Like let's do the video interviews. We'll do like set produced videos in a nice location, but on different locations. We'll edit the audio. We'll put that as a podcast. I'll write a short story to go with it. We'll embed the audio and the video, so there'll be like a place where you can get all three. And it was this really awesome package, and it won some awards and everything else. And it was exhausting. I did like 7 or 8 episodes, and Louis, man, it was because it was just me, our video guy, Matthias Ochner, and usually a +1 photographer to set up a camera. And then he's editing all the video. I'm editing all the audio. It's all done in post. We're adding music, plus I'm still, writing for the newspaper, and I have stories to turn in, and I report. I'm trying to be on top of the things that I cover. And it was untenable. Like, it was fantastic that there's the old saying, I love to have written. And I loved to have done that show. And I'm glad, and I would never do it in that way again unless I had a full dedicated team. Like,
Yeah.
I was just the host. Like, I would show up, I would do the interview, and then I would go on with my life. And then everybody else would do their jobs, an editor, editing audio, a person doing video, people who are miking, a sound guy, people doing video. That's the only way to do that. That's why TV budgets are so big, because otherwise it's exhausting for 2 people to do everything. So I said, if I want to do it again, I'm going to do it totally different.
No, it is absolutely. You know what? Just briefly, I wanted your take on this. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about storytelling that way compared to what, as a writer, you go to a place, or you go to an event, or you're talking to somebody, and you're basically coming back and you're telling me about that experience or that person through your narrative. With audio or with video, obviously there's a lot of more production involved, but you're still storytelling, but it is a different storytelling. I don't know. Is there one you prefer? What do you think about that?
Well, it's almost 2 different. It's 2 different outcomes for sure. And I think that's why, like, good reported pieces that are radio or that are audio or video versus written take longer to do, because you go and you shoot video. Well, here's how it is with writing. You go, you interview the person. You interview a second person. You come home and you think about it, and you think about the interview that you had. And then you think, I should talk to this other person. And then you get that. And that person gives you a different perspective on the first person. You say, you know what? I should go back and talk to that first person about this perspective. And then you do. And then once you've interviewed everybody, you sit down to write. As you write into being your thoughts. Then you become the filter. Then you become, because writing is thinking, right? Writing isn't the physical pecking of keys on a keyboard. It is the thinking, what does this mean? How do I express a feeling? How do I express the thing that I have inside after talking to these people that has made me feel a certain way? What do I feel? And then that's the thing. And then, like, writing is revealing, right? And so that process is a tire, and like trying to do that when you have to go back and do a video interview, like the idea of trying to get somebody to sit down again and do the lights right and get the sound right and bring in the 10 people to do the thing, you can't do that. You can't do that.
No,
which
you
is
got
why
to get it all in one shot, man.
you all get it all in one shot, which is why I think that writing is a more in-depth storytelling. Like it's a more in-depth storytelling. But the other ones, obviously the other mediums, there's something visually about seeing an interaction between two people that is interesting.
Yeah.
Audio, there's a feeling of like of the story being pumped directly into your body. Like it's something with your eyeballs when you're looking at it, you still have a distance. But with audio, it's like it's chattering the bones under your teeth. You know, like the audio is affecting you physically, and which is why I'm obsessive about, like, if you listen to our podcast, my audio is clean because I like that feeling of knowing that people are going to put their earbuds in and they're going to stream your voice directly into their heads. You know what I mean? There's something
Right.
about that. So I think they each have a different challenge, and I feel like a total novice in the areas that are not writing, but I try to remind myself anytime I feel nervous, you're about to learn something.
Well, I tell you what, I'll say to anybody, just look at you now. You're sitting in there in your room with your microphone. You got a microphone, buddy. All right. Last couple of quick questions I wanted to ask you. So much of what you said, and this has really stuck with me, and especially what you said about writing, which is revealing. I want to help people understand who we are, what we do. This is what this is all about. What we do as journalists. What is it you wish that readers could understand about what you do as a writer, and maybe what they get wrong? And it's not to I don't want to look down on people. This is not talking down to people. This is saying, look, I love what you've been saying. We don't know everything. We shouldn't go. I never go into an interview knowing everything. I don't. I'm just the curious guy asking questions. But what is it you wish people would understand more about what you are as a journalist, what you do?
I think that number one, we are not stenographers, right? Like we don't go and talk to the senator and talk to the chef, and they say 75 words, and we write them down and we scribble them all on a piece of paper. We record every word, and then we turn over every word. Like we are not the Library of Congress. We are not a transcription service, right? Writing journalism is thinking, is using your head. And by that, I mean talking to people and then going home and sitting in silence in a quiet place and thinking, what does that mean? And reading over the quotes. And it's being attentive. So when someone's talking to you and they're telling you something, you're taking in the facts, and then you're stopping to say, when they catch something, and say, well, tell me about that again. Tell me more about that. It's revealing your lack of knowledge and letting yourself be curious to get those questions answered. Not just questions that other people would answer. You're the filter. The newspaper, the outlet is hiring you because they believe in your particular ability to take all of this noise, all of these sounds, and filter it down into a way that gets at the heart of what the thing is, right? And if you and I go to a thing and we report on a subject, we're going to have different takes on it. Like it's going to read a little different because you're different than me. As a human being, you hear things and see things slightly different than I do. So that's part of it. Like we can't say that there's no implicit bias. We may have it. We do. We walk around human beings. We have an implicit bias. But it's listening to everybody, and then it's thinking, what did that mean? And if you don't know, it's about making a call back and saying, did you mean this? And I think that's what people miss, I think, or maybe just they don't know about the job, and that's that journalism is talking to so many people, and it's spending a lot of time thinking about what that means,
Well put. The last thing I wanted to ask you is, you and I are from a generation, and let me do that again. You and me are from a generation, get the grammar right, that we remember, before social media, and we would just go, and our job was go tell the story, meet the deadline. And now it's, you have editors like get the story, meet the deadline. Don't forget to tweet it. Don't forget to Instagram it. Don't forget to this. It's posting it in all these places. And it's a form of storytelling. And maybe there's an audience that is just in those places. And that's what we have to do. We have to meet the audience wherever they are. What do you think about that though? Like, having to write your story, but then it's like, you got to write the story kind of again, sort of again. And by the way, I think you're really good at this. I love some of the videos you've done, the things you've done that are social media specific. They really are fun, but I know it also takes a lot of extra work. But I don't know, your thoughts on how we have to use that now in telling stories. And is that good? Is it a good thing?
I mean, it's a good thing if you're paid for it. Honestly. Yeah, man.
Thank you. Yes, exactly.
It's a good thing if you're paid for it because I love what I do, but I wouldn't do it for free.
Yeah.
And I think more and more the problem that we're having in our industry is that as there are more abilities, as there exists a greater ability to tell the story in different ways, you're being asked to tell those stories in different ways without being compensated for it. And this is a big thing that's happening in our industry. I mean, writers too often are so insecure in their ability to write that they will do it for free or they will do it for cheap, and they will devalue what it means to write. And let me tell you how important it is to write. I can show you just one email on any given day, and I can show you how rare the ability to not just use punctuation correctly, but to use the gray matter in between your ears efficiently, how rare that ability is. And I think journalists, writers in general, underestimate that skill. Now, on top of that, then learning audio, like the countless hours that I spent learning how to use Adobe Audition on my own, doing online tutoring, trial and error. I mean, I spent 2 hours yesterday just trying to fix some audio, and that's technically, that's part of the job. Is it? Is it? Mm-hmm. So I like the end result. I like being able to access all those mediums and being able to share those things. But I think that that you have to keep in mind how much time that's eating into the rest of your life, and I think that's important. So
if you're good at something, don't give it away.
No.
Don't do it for free.
And that's the other thing is journalism, writing, radio, everything else is not a gift. It is a craft. It's carpentry. The first time you build a table, it's gonna wobble and it's not gonna be right, and you're gonna spend the rest of your life that you're doing carpentry getting good at it, and it's just picking up little skills. And that's writing. Writing is just carpentry. It's not waiting for inspiration to strike. It's the hustle, and it's reading, and it's trying new things, and it's a craft. It's the craft of improving,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the important thing to remember is that you are going, as long as you care about being good at it, you're going to get better at it, even if you're not great at it right away at the beginning.
Well put, Carlos. I appreciate having you in the reporter studio, man. Thanks so much.
It's my pleasure, Louis. Anytime, my friend.
All right, let me stop broadcast here, and then let me